Okay, so it's 11 a.m. We're going to go ahead and get started. So it's just going to be 30 minutes. Hopefully, I've got enough information I can fill up the time. But this is Rachel Cassidy. I'm with the Utah Division of Drinking Water. Hopefully, if you can see my screen, you've joined the webinar. My email address is rcassidy, Cassady, at utah.gov. That's the best way to get a hold of me. So the webinars, we're going to do these webinars for the operators every month. We plan on either the third or the fourth Monday of every month, except we realize it's like the fifth Monday, but we're slow for January. But we're going to do it every month. It's just going to be a short 30 minutes, and we are going to offer CEUs. There's a little link at the end of the presentation that I'll show you. You'll go to the Google link and answer some questions, input your name and your water operator number, and then we will give you your CEUs. So if you come to all of them, just think of the copious amounts of CEUs that you're going to be able to log, hopefully over time. So anyway, so welcome. We're excited that we have the ability to do this. We do realize this is the first one, so go easy on us. Hopefully I won't have any technical difficulties, but if you are not able to join the webinar, please call in. And then if you have somebody that you want to see the webinar later, we are recording it and we'll put it on our YouTube site. So you will be able to see it on YouTube later on if you need to share it with anybody who might also want some CEUs. So it's our webinar, and let's get started. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was our organization. We just recently lost our old director, Ken Bausfeld. I'm going to go to the org chart on our website. It's easier to see here in a second. And we have a new director. We're very excited to welcome our new director. Here's her picture. This is Marie Owens. She comes to us from Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. She was recently their Water Quality Division Manager. And before that, she was at the Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy. She's held multiple leadership positions at American Water Works Association and was one of the co-founders of the Utah Women of Water organization. And she is a professional engineer. So we are thrilled to have Marie on board. Let's see, so here's the org chart. We have 6 sections with Marie at the helm. We've got Eva as our technical assistants with surface water systems, and all of our 6 sections. So hopefully you haven't fallen asleep yet, because there's a quiz at the end of this, and that's going to be 2 things that you're going to have to answer about Marie. That's how we're going to hook you into listening to the whole thing. So one thing you need to know about Marie at the end of the webinar is that she went to Utah State University, and her favorite book is that she's a huge fan of Tolkien. Did I say that right? She's a huge fan of Tolkien. So remember that, because you're going to need to know that if you want your CEUs at the end. So anyway, I'm Rachel over here, Rachel Cassidy, the Rules Implementation Manager. And throughout the life cycle of all of our webinars, I'm sure you'll be hearing from a lot of our managers, a lot of our staff here at the division. So kind of excited to be able to communicate with you guys this way. Hopefully we're not going to blow it right off the bat. So let's talk about the first thing on our agenda, and that is data falsification. So one of the rules that we're in charge of is the total coliform rule. And actually a couple of the labs came to me recently with an issue that we needed to talk to everybody about. So that's kind of how the whole webinar idea started, and that is falsification of data. So here is a copy of a routine total coliform hard copy, the actual chain of custody form that the water operators are filling out in the field or when you're dropping the bottles off with the lab. And there's 3 main ways you can mark your sample type. You can mark it as a routine, this first option right here in the red box. You can mark it as a repeat, which is after one of your routines has come back positive for total coliform and or E. coli. You can mark it investigative. We call it investigative, or you can mark it special, but we cannot by rule run compliance on these investigative samples. it's a tool for the water systems to use, like as you're doing new construction. If you've cleaned a tank and you haven't put something in the system online yet, you're going to mark it special or investigative, and then we know not to use that sample result as part of your regular compliance. So the problem we started having is that the laboratories were calling us up and saying, hey, Rachel, or anybody in the division, would you please change my investigative or my special sample to routine? So what's been going on is some, and this is definitely not all, it's a small percentage, but it caused enough commotion to pique my interest and want to talk to everybody about it. A handful of operators were doing it to the point where month after month, it became obvious that they were taking the sample, marking it investigative to make sure that it came back satisfactory. And then once it came back satisfactory, then they were coming to the division and saying, oh, by the way, just kidding, that's not investigative, that's supposed to be routine. So that doesn't fly. We have to, if it's marked routine, it's a routine sample, unless you come up with a reason like it was a new sampler or something happened uniquely, one-time thing to make this investigative go to a routine. Obviously, there'll be special circumstances where that happens, but it's becoming prolific to the point where we just need to let everybody know that this is not allowed. So this is an example of a total coliform sample form that's clearly marked routine, and it was not meant to be repeat, investigative, or these other types of samples. So here's an example, my next example, and I got rid of all the identifying information, hopefully enough of it. Here's an example where it's clearly marked investigative. So what I have seen and what staff here at the division has seen is they'll cross that out, they'll initial it, and then they'll mark it routine. And that's just something that we need to notify water operators that we just can't allow it. There's no shame in having a positive sample. The whole purpose behind the rule is to see if you're going to have positive samples or not positive samples. We're not out there to get you with multiple violations and to rack up your IPS points. That's not what we're out to do. We're out to help you determine if there is coliform existing in your water system, confirmed coliform, how can we work with you to help solve the problem? So please don't shy away from your routine samples. If a routine sample comes back positive, you can call us and we'll walk you through what steps you need to take to get your repeats done to satisfy the total coliform rule. And then also, if you have groundwater sources, what triggered samples you have to take from your groundwater sources to satisfy the groundwater rules. So we're here to work with you. And any notice of violation, for failure to sample it just doesn't make any sense to not mark it routine. It's just easier for you. It makes more sense to just be straight up. We're testing the water, and if it's positive, and we'll work with you. You can have a positive routine sample, and if your repeats come back satisfactory, there is no violation because you followed all of the procedures to double check and make sure that that there was nothing actually going on with the drinking water. So it's not bad to get a positive routine sample. We're just trying to figure out along with you what's going on with the water. So with that in mind, we wanted to let you guys know what, let's see, we need you to know what happens if we start to suspect that the data is being falsified. So this is if the data is marked investigative initially, initialed out, and remarked as routine. So if we start to suspect this, this is what happens. The OpCert program is run here by Kim Dykes. He's in charge of the operator certification program, and he's the one that you would have organized your test through and gotten your certification. So I would go to Kim Dykes, and Kim Dykes would go to the Operator Certification Commission. We'd have to show that the conditions were under the operator's control, that the operator was completely capable and had complete control over the marking investigative versus routine. So that's really important. Um, so what Kim Dykes would do is you would get a notice from Kim Dykes. You would be notified in writing that the falsification was suspected, and then there would be a hearing. This hearing is through the Operator Certification Commission, and they would come to a decision, yay or nay. Was there serious data falsification involved in the situation? And if there is, then it's definitely grounds for pulling that operator's license in the state of Utah. So it's very serious. We just want to make everybody aware. We're paying attention to the routines versus investigatives, and we want you guys to pay attention to that too. And if you get positive samples, it's no, we're not out to get you. We're just out to work with you on what to do next. Okay. So I've muted you, so you can't ask me questions. But people who are actually on the webinar, you can type in a question for me. I don't see any questions on my screen, so I'm just going to plow ahead. Let's see. Okay, so we next wanted to talk about sample site plans. So the total coliform rule has a requirement. Anytime you're taking samples in the distribution system, you have to have a sampling site plan. So total coliform samples are required to be taken in the distribution system, but so are lead and copper samples and your disinfection byproduct samples. So anytime you're taking samples in the distribution system, you want a plan that shows what sites you're taking these samples from and when, where, why, and how. Okay, but so for the total coliform rule, we need copies of your sampling site plans. Our deadline for the sampling site plans is September 30th of this year, so heads up. We were going to work with water systems to help everybody come into compliance and make sure they've submitted their updated sampling site plan by the end of September. We have forms online. The Rural Water Association has a form that they've put together. We're working on possibly doing a MAP online form. We'll see if we can pull that together. We'll be at the Rural Water Conference in another month or so, working on the sampling site plans. So we're hopefully giving everybody plenty of notice, and we want to give you plenty of tools to get that taken care of. So what are the requirements? It has to actually be written down, preferably on included with a map, or we have these forms that you can use, but you can't just say verbally that you have met that requirement. That's not going to fly. So it's something that has to be written down. At least 5 sites or 2 times the number of coliform routines is required. So that's how many sites you have to have. And then you'll want to make sure that in your plan, if you're taking more than 5 routines, that you're not all taking them all on the same day. And then just be very careful about taking coliform samples towards the 30th and the 31st, because it doesn't give you a lot of time to follow up and get your repeat samples taken. And because those repeat samples, if you do get a positive, repeat samples have to be taken within 24 hours, and it gets difficult when you start to straddle months. So just some general recommendations on that. I gotta go to another screen. Okay, so I have some examples of some sampling site plans. Let's go check them out. Okay, here's our org chart. Been there, done that. Okay, this is what I wanted. This is a sampling site plan for a water system in, I think it's in southern Utah, Sky Ranch. They've submitted the map of the system with a list of the sites down below. And then you can see it looks like they've Google marked each location. And the idea is that they're rotating their monthly sample to different locations throughout the month, because you want to get a good idea of the water quality throughout your entire distribution system. It's a bad idea to keep taking that monthly sample from the same location every single time. You've got to rotate that through. So they've got the 5 sites, and they've marked it on the map, and it looks like they've got a really good representation of the different locations in their distribution system. So here's an example. You can just do a map version. Whoops. And then here's another example. This is the written version, and this is a form that will It's on our website, but it's really hard to find. We'll put it on the front page in the coming days, so you can just download it. Our website is this drinkingwater.utah.gov. So here's an example of a pretend test system, Duckburg, that Colt put together. Um, so you can just see they put the water system information, who the samples are typically going to be collected by, the name of the laboratory, more information about the laboratory, and that this is really important, I think, is that is the laboratory has a copy of your sampling site plan. That could be extremely helpful down the line if you do get positive samples. This is page 1, just raw information. Page 2, we start getting down to your sample locations. So name, address, description. You can click the months that you're going to take those samples from. And then this is really highly recommended, and that is what to do, where are you going to sample from if this site comes back positive. So if this number 1 Yellow Canyon Diner on Elm Street comes back positive, what are going to be the upstream and downstream locations that you as an operator can sample from if that's positive? This is very helpful. I don't know, like if you're going to be out of town, let's say you have a life. Yeah, oh, and succession planning as well. So, if you retire or if you suddenly decide to just run away, the people who come after you have something to go from. Where is it appropriate? So it should technically be within 5 connections upstream for your upstream site and 5 connections downstream for your downstream site. And the sampling plan just has the 3 sites, but you're going to need at least 5 routine sites for your TC sampling site plan. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. We're going to be doing trainings on these just throughout the entire summer. And we're going to be working really hard to make sure that you can meet this requirement. We don't want to do any violations. There is a violation code for failure to submit your sampling site plan as part of the new total coliform rule. And it's a type code 5A. That probably doesn't mean anything to you, but it is a violation if you don't, violation type A, if you don't submit your sampling site plan to the division by September 30th. So I was going to show you on WaterLink where you can see that requirement. Eileen, I can see your line. I'm going to pick on your system. Hopefully that's okay. So this is waterlink.utah.gov. If you can put in your water system number, or you can just type in the name and select your water system. But we've already got Salt Lake City up here. So once you've got your water system selected, you've got these main reports over here on the right-hand side that you can use to see what kind of data we have on your water system. If you click on water monitoring, the one that it defaults to is your inventory, and that just lists how many connections we show, treatment plan information, source information. You can scroll through it at your leisure. Okay, so click on water monitoring, and it should quickly pull up the water monitoring requirements. So I'm going to click hide details because Salt Lake City gets kind of long. You guys have a huge system. So you can see there's the bacteriological monitoring. Any sampling in the distribution is what starts off this report. After that, it's the, you can see lead and copper there. Then it's the chem sampling later on in the midsection, and any information on entry points. But then also at the bottom here, this section is somewhat new. I think a lot of water operators are not used to seeing this section or paying attention to it, but it's something, this is where you'll see the requirement for that sampling site plan. So it says open compliance schedules, and these are the compliance schedules that have to happen within the upcoming time frame. If you have satisfied a requirement in here, then it will disappear magically off the report. So as soon as we get, and every community water system will see this consumer confidence requirement as of Friday at like 9 o'clock, because I have a really exciting life on the weekends. So this will show up on all community systems, but also fairly soon here, like within the next month, it'll show up to have your total coliform sampling site plan and that you'll see that requirement down here on your water monitoring schedule. So pay attention to that. That'll be where that requirement will show up. And then as soon as that requirement is met, then it will disappear off of your open compliance schedules. One other thing, since we're in WaterLink, since we're hanging out here, I'm going to show you this bacterial summary report is where you can see your total coliform sample history. So it just has the main header for your water system, and then it shows the requirement to take so many routines per month, which is based on water system population. If your population goes up, the number of samples you take per month could possibly go up depending on if you cross a threshold in the rule. If it goes down, the number of routines you can take can also go down. So you can put a huge date range in here. You can say, I want to see all of the total coliform samples for the past 4 years. So just put your date range, hit go. And there's 3 main columns. The first column will show you your repeat samples. Let me see if I can. Okay, so repeat your routine samples right here. This is anything, the total number of samples that were taken during this time frame. If they were positive, the number would also show up here for total coliform. If that total coliform, if there was one sample here that was total coliform positive and E. coli positive, you would see a 1 and a 1 in those columns. So these show your basic routine samples. If you had to take repeat samples, and you did take repeat samples, the total number of repeat samples you took would show up in this column. If they were TC positive, you would also get a 1 or a 2 or a 3, the total number here, and E. coli positive here. This column is where your groundwater triggered samples show up. So if you had positive routine samples that required you to take triggered coliform samples at your source, your groundwater sources, then the total number that you took would show up here. If those samples, any of them were positive for just coliform, show up in this column, and if any of those are positive for E. coli, in this far column. So it's these 3 sections right here. You'll notice, since we talked at the beginning of the webinar about investigative samples, none of these columns show investigative samples. So it's not something that we even show on these main reports. It's just it's not something we use for compliance. So use those investigators as a tool, but don't expect that we can use those for your compliance. So that is pretty much all I have, you guys, for the webinar. I think that's close. We're close. We're like 25 minutes. So I'm going to show you how to get your CEUs. So let's do that. Okay, here's the link to get your CEUs. We'll post this on the website a little bit later, but take a screenshot while you can, and we'll post it on our website later on. But it'll be on the YouTube at the end of the YouTube program. So you want to type this in, and then it will take you. I'll show you. Did everybody get the screenshot? If you are just on the phone call and you're not able to get a screenshot, don't worry, because this will be on our YouTube site at the bottom of the at the end of the YouTube webinar. So it will take you to this link, and it will ask you to fill in your first name, your last name, your OPCERT number, the water system that you're with. Oh, the name, sorry, not the number. There's the number. So you type in the water system name, the water system number. We kind of want to get some feedback. Was the webinar helpful? Not helpful? Very helpful? You tell us. We also want to know, have you heard about the webinar? What topics you would like to hear in the future? If you have other topics, you can type those in. We'd love to hear what you need to hear from us. And then this information, this is what will get you your CEUs. This is why I told you to pay attention in the beginning. And that is where did our new director, Marie Owens, attend college. Obviously, you know it's Utah State. and she's a big fan of J.R.R. Tolkien. And then you just hit submit, and then we will update your CUs. So we're excited to have this format. We will do a better job next time of having more people allowed in on the webinar. We have enough capacity for about 300 people on the call, um, and just under 100 for the actual webinar link, which we plan to fix in the future. So we're working on that part. Anyway, so that's all I've got for you guys today. So thanks for attending. And our next one, our next monthly webinar, because the Rural Water Conference, everybody's going to be traveling on February 27th, and the 20th is a holiday. The next webinar is actually only 2 weeks from today, and we'll get an email out about that. So it's going to be February 13th at 11 a.m., and the main topic is going to be talking about the Rural Water Conference. And we've got hopefully some staff from the Rural Water Association coming to help with that webinar, so you'll hear from them talk about the conference and kind of what to expect if you're attending. So we hope to see you back at our February 13th webinar at 11 a.m. And thanks for attending this one today. I appreciate it. Have a good one. Bye.